I think a lot of like sales leaders need to, should take the time to be cognizant of like the perverse behaviors you can create with a poor comp structure.
Welcome to another edition of Brews and BizDev. This time, our illustrious guest is Clark Dever, Program Director for Techstars Buffalo and the man of many other pursuits and titles. So I'm going to hand it right away. First of all, Clark, thanks for joining me this morning. Love that background. You. Very cool. Big fan of the blank white backgrounds.
Yeah. I can't afford a studio. Eventually you'll see like my 1970s wood paneling pop through, but maybe you can see it usually in the gap between my.
Oh yes, there it is. Nice.
But I was like, oh, that's such a clean aesthetic. Let's go for it.
And let's match it up. I do kind of like that wood panel though. So if I could replicate that, I'd have that behind me. So yeah, elevator pitch portion here. Why don't you just introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners? Who are you? What are you doing? What are you up to these days?
Yeah, my name's Clark Dever, as introduced before. I'm the program director for ecosystem development for Techstars in Buffalo. What that means is that I work with everything involving the startup communities. So, entrepreneurs first, and founders. And I define a founder as someone who's building a company that's supposed to be $5 or $10 million 3 or 4 years from now. So a little bit different than just a straight entrepreneur that maybe is building a more traditional business. And then alongside them, you have investors, you have universities, you have all these different programs that are run by the state that try, like 43 North, that try and support that ecosystem. So my job is really just working with founders to help them be more successful on the kind of international stage, and then also working with all of the different folks in the community. And I would say most of what I do is just connect people together. It sounds kind of silly, but I think it's one of the most effective things that we've done. Is every meeting I have, I try and introduce 2 people to that person that I'm meeting with, and just knitting together that network density over time creates great results. And from a sales standpoint, right? I mean, that's really a way that you can add a ton of value out of the gate, just because you're always talking to new people and you're meeting new folks all the time. And so if you can find those shared interests and connect people together, there's a serendipity to it that is amazing.
Yeah, no doubt. I was actually, I had Matt Carlucci on a few episodes ago. I don't know, I've lost track already with these things. And your name came up because we were talking about relationships and connections and stuff like that. And he had mentioned that it was in some conversation with you, and then you actually asked, and actually asked. I want to emphasize, oh, so what do you do? So like waiting for the finish, and you can come in with the pitch. Like, okay, what is it you are actually doing? What is it you're actually selling? Which is valuable for someone like Matt, who will not talk about it unless you press it, right? He's like so relationship that you got to get the info out of him. But he said that you intentionally asked and then actually made introductions based on that. And I was like, yeah, well, that's the difference between people who are bullshitting in a kind of like a networking setting, right? And then already like waiting for their turn, and then someone who like actively wants to make a connection. You're going to have to ask, oh, what do you do and what are you looking for, so I can connect something of value. So the actually connecting people based on what's valuable to them is something, ironically, you don't find in your average networking group.
I think active listening is one of the greatest skills that you can develop. And I'm still bad at it, but I try again and again. Sitting there waiting for your turn to talk, just people see right through it. And I think it makes life kind of sucky, right? Like if you actually just like want to find out about people genuinely and learn what makes them tick. It's like being a scientist, it's like being an anthropologist, like I love humans and just, finding out more about them. And I think, good sales technique is that, right? Like your job is to help them solve a problem, right? And hopefully that involves your product, but maybe it doesn't, or maybe it's a mix, or maybe because you help them today, when they do have the problem that your product solves, they give you a call. Yeah. And, I think that's what I see a lot of young folks do wrong, right? Is they're like trying so hard to close that they miss it. Like I had the worst sales experience of my last year like 2 days ago.
Oh man,
And
amazing. These are my favorite stories.
yeah, I came in. So we're working on this startup week, right, which is a 5-day conference with 25 plus events. So we go to this conference, software provider, and you can't talk to someone initially. You have to go to some stupid webinar. So I sent my my friend. I was like, hey, please go do the webinar because I have kids. I don't want to sit at a webinar at 5 p.m. And then, so we finally get escalated to the sales guy, and he goes, oh, well, tell me a little bit about what you're doing. And I tell him, and he's like, oh, I don't think you're a fit for us. And I was like, did you just disqualify me like 2 minutes into a call? Like, I was just like, no, I think we are. And I told him this whole story about how, we got this conference, it's 25 events. I was like, and I work for a company that does 100 of these conferences a year. Right. So like right there, I'm already like, hey, guess what? There's lots of stuff. And I wasn't asking for a freebie or a pilot or anything. Like I had already said, like, there's money on the table. Do you want it? Yeah. And the dude disqualified me. And I was just like, all right, well, I guess we're done. Like we're 5 minutes in, you got to a no. All right, well, have a nice day. And so I hung up. I hung up, and he gives me this, like, his boilerplate, like, oh, you didn't match our needs, our profile email. Sorry. And I reply, and I went on LinkedIn and I found the founder of the company and I put him in the CC line, and I reiterated, I was like, listen, man, I was like, I still think we're a thing. I feel like you didn't listen to me. Like I didn't feel heard during that conversation. Right. And I'm sorry that we got to this place, but I know you just raised VC money, and I know that you got this awesome tailwind from COVID, but blah, 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 blah. Right. Mm-hmm. And, and so he comes back, he goes, because he was quoting me a $13,000 year-long subscription. I was like, I need this thing for a week. I was like, I got a budget, I can give you $3 or $5 grand for a week, right? Like that seems to make sense if it's $13,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so they come back like, oh, we have a monthly plan. It's $99 an organizer. And so they went from getting like $3 or $5 grand out of me to probably getting like less than $1,000 out of me. And it was all because he didn't listen, and he didn't ask, and he didn't probe. He didn't find out what my budget, was. I mean, because obviously like all pricing is just like ephemeral, right? For the most part, like sometimes you have a little bit of handcuffing, but I mean, the thing that he was quoting was like totally just the back of the napkin. Like, oh, what can we get people to pay?
Yeah. Yeah. And in the services world, the pricing has a lot of latitude, and yes.
But so anyways, if he just actively listened and heard what my problems were and what I was trying to solve and come up with a solution, he would have made more money, and he probably would have got, anyways. Just those things.
No, that's a great example of, just running through, doing your quantity thing, right? Doing the volume based, like, oh, if you can get, the quicker you can get to a no, if there's a no there, the quicker you can get to it, the easier and the more calls I can get on next. So that classic qualification line, you have to watch a webinar, you got to work your way up, you got some different levels. That's one of my favorite things too. It happens in the SaaS spaces, quite a bit, where you've got those just levels, and you've got the SDR or whoever it is, who you have to talk to. And then once you get qualified and once you have the conversation where you give all the relevant information, you then get passed off to someone that you get to go through that whole fucking experience with. And you can't even get a demo if you want a demo in that first stage. Like it's like this insanely, it's totally the selling funnel versus an actual buyer's journey, right? It's like totally not geared for the people to have a great experience, and it's not even geared for internal efficiency. It's just set up, on these bad metrics and on this.
Well, it's for metric collection, really, right? They're like, oh, where are people falling out? And it's like, well, maybe part of it is you've created these like set of hurdles.
Yeah. Yes. You might not want to like piss everybody off in the process, and then maybe you get a few more people. Or to your point, like you had said, right? Like maybe even if it's not a fit right now, there is something where it can become a fit later. And just dismiss people and fuck.
Well, and to disqualify, I mean, in this specific case, right? Like I had told him we have 100 more of these. So obviously, like there's money there, and you might like be able to sell me on an enterprise thing, but like take me a step further, right? Like have a conversation with me, go back to your manager and talk about it, right? Like, I mean, there's lots of tools in the toolbox as a salesperson that dude didn't even touch. right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's have let me find out more. Tell me more. Okay, what's this? And then like you go and verify that all this stuff exists, and you go, okay, well, let me actually go talk to the boss, right? Like, hey, we got this weird
Yeah.
deal here, but I think I can close it. What are we looking at? Because
Listen,
I
Clark,
mean, they
that's
could have turned
15
it.
minutes that that guy just does not have. Okay, he's busy, busy, busy.
Well, I think it's the classic, like, I mean, it's this dilemma you get on when you incentivize people in their comp structure, right? I think a lot of like sales leaders need to, should take the time to be cognizant of like the perverse behaviors you can create with a poor comp structure.
Yeah, yes, that's a big, you get what you're paying people for. And, if you're paying people for disqualifications, basically, because they have to force their way to the sure thing, the obvious kind of win so they can get those commissions up, you're going to get treated like that. And today, that's a little ass backwards given the other options that are available for just about anything, right? And the fact that just about everybody is in a slightly worse mood than they normally were for like the last 4 months or so. I don't know.
That's actually how I introed my reply email when I CC'd the CEO on it. I was like, this might have been my fault. Like it might have been my reaction that caused this, but I just want to tell you what like.
Exactly. Yeah, which is nice. That's a friendly way of doing it. I know that when I've talked about it on here before, but I talk a lot about LinkedIn, like bad messaging. And there's a lot of email-based bad messaging as well, but LinkedIn got a special version of it. And at some points, like if you catch people at the wrong time of day, you're going to get a bad reaction. And I've prefaced some of my, I guess you could call them bad reactions, like, well, listen, like this is garbage. Now you did just catch me in the evening. Also, another reason to not send these messages in the evening because it just came through. I'm on my front porch trying to get over what's already a bad day, trying to relax, and here comes this message where you lied to me in the connect request so you could hit me with some spam. And listen, here's the rundown. And at the end of it, now if you want help with any of this, like let your bosses know we can help. But you got to watch out for those reactions. You don't know what you're sending a message into, right? You don't know the listening that you're speaking into when you're doing that. And if you're doing something that already sucks as a practice anyway, you're really running the risk of getting some people. Most people don't react like I do. They just shit talk you to everyone else.
Well, and I just think it's like, again, it comes back to that. Even online, you can be an active listener. You can be a human first, right? Take the extra 30 seconds to like make some banter, have some small talk, right? Like become a human and then make the thing. Cause like, if you're too efficient, you lose effectiveness oftentimes, and I think that it's just, I'm much more responsive to people that are conversational at first. Sometimes I get mad that they're wasting my time. So there's like a little window. You got to figure out like how long you can be conversational.
It's a line, right? Yeah, it's not like 6 paragraphs worth of small talk. I don't like small talk.
To me, it's always just like, do your research, right? Like I mean, even before we started recording, I was saying like, the key to success in all these things is pre-production, right? Like if I announce something and it seems like it's a surprise, I probably spent 6 months working on it. Right. And so if you're gonna, if I'm a high value target, that you're trying to access, like go read my profile, figure out where I'm from, bullshit some connection. Oh, I went to school at the same school you did. Like, I mean, obviously if your profile says something different, like we're gonna, that's not a good line, but you could say you grew up near me, whatever. Like, oh, I'm into rugby, like whatever, figure out what and just come in with a soft lead that lets me know that you actually read.
Yeah, like you actually took 15 seconds and looked me up. Even at the level of profile or the level of some surface thing.
That it wasn't just your bot scraping a search result and sending me your open line.
Also, try to get my name right. That's also just here's a hot tip for the SDRs sending LinkedIn messages and emails. Get the fucking name right. I got an email yesterday to Neil.
Yep.
Email. I got an email, and it's dear Neil. It's to my email, which is Paul at. And it says, dear Neil, and it references me in the email. It says, hey, I don't know if your sales director or whatever the hell is using it. Paul, it says in parentheses, is using blah blah blah. And again, I respond, right? So I had to respond like, I'm Paul, which you can tell by the Paul in my address. I am that director you're talking about. And so if this is how your software works that you're pitching, because of course it's lead gen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that doesn't look very good. I don't think
Yeah.
your stuff's very good. B, no, we're not interested. We're not in a position for that anyway. But you might want to check into that. Thanks, Luke, or whatever, and have a good one, right? So like, get the info right.
Yeah.
And which is hard if your software sucks and you're being too efficient, as you said, right? I've always thought that if what you're doing isn't effective, then efficiency is just you losing faster.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends, right? If you can spam 100 dummies in the time it takes you to do it right twice, and you still have a 2% conversion rate, then they're equally effective. You just made 98 people not like you.
Yeah. And if you're not going for brand, because someone said this recently too, she's like, well, it still does depend on what you're looking for, right? If you don't actually care what your reputation, let's say in a small community like this one is,
right?
So if you don't care that you hit me with a connect based on, hey, 716, love it, just want to connect with people in my community, and as soon as I hit yes, you came with a spam response.
Yeah.
If you don't care about that, if you don't care about turning people off, or if the reach is a big enough kind of a play where you're not going to get blowback from it, and you're selling, something that just runs on its own, you don't have to interact with people that you've sold, because the people you sell that way are probably not high quality either, don't really have their shit together, and any relationship between you would be a nightmare. So if you're not having a relationship and you don't care the kind of people that you're going to sell, and they don't care how they're sold to, then do all this shit, right? Just, spam people all day long, do
it's the right tool for the job. It's the right tool for the job,
Yeah. If you want people to like you, if you want to maintain relationships, you want to build and you want to grow relationships into something else, you probably shouldn't start it that way, I guess.
That's the opposite of how I sell. But I can respect it. I mean, there's a mechanical efficiency to it, right? Like we're just saying, hey, and I mean, the truth is we're in a global marketplace, right? So you have billions of prospects, and probably hundreds of millions of people that you could actually address that are segmented for your thing. I mean, if you think about it, maybe millions, but we'll say hundreds of millions. And so why not? Right. I mean, you could run a very profitable business using that stuff, but I'm a human to human player, and I just don't vibe that way. But I do think that there's a value to it. And I think sometimes there's a value to it early on, too. I think the rule is, don't crap where you eat, right? Just, if you're going to do that, don't target your local community, go out into the world. And, it could be a effective way to bootstrap your business, and then maybe have some, I don't know. I mean, again, with lead gen, right? It's about getting people on the phone, and you could do some really good customer discovery, and maybe you improve those tools over time. I mean, I like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but obviously,
Yes.
Well, everyone can improve. That's what this podcast is about. Everyone can improve, right?
Yeah, we brought it out there. So we, gave everyone the benefit of the doubt, even though we hate their techniques. And mostly the ones I've been ramping on lately, they are the more localized ones, right? When the financial advisor in Buffalo is reaching out with those kind of ways, like you're murdering yourself. And like I've said before, and your firm doesn't care, right? You're being set up that way because they don't care if you ruin your relationships, because most likely you're going to be gone in 6 months anyway, and either your friends and family bought what you're selling already or not, and then you're out, and then the next person comes through. So it's an appeal to the people for me, because I don't believe the firms are going to change until they're forced to. Right. But if you have some level of leeway within what you're allowed to do, there are way better ways of doing it, and it's not just wait until we can have events again live and go shake hands and do the live version of the not listening pitching people. It's build value, build relationships, the same thing Carlucci's always talking about, the same thing you're talking about. There's a way of doing that online and live, and hopefully blended, right? When we're in a normal world again, those things, you get offline business from online activity. But it's stupid to shit in your own backyard. Well, I guess.
So Paul, I wanted to, I'm trying to bring up the tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So I had a local law firm pitch me on some stuff a couple weeks ago, and it was in an email, and it was like a wall of text. It was like 600 words, and not effective, guys. Again, get someone on the phone. So what I used to do when I was a service provider is I would call. I would call people. I'd call my lead, and then as soon as I got them on the phone, I'd hit send. And then because then you're in the conversation. Hey, did you get that email? Oh no, not yet. Oh, hit refresh. I sent it a little while ago. And then it comes in. Oh yeah, here it is. All right, well, let's talk through it. Let's talk through the proposal. And just so much more effective, right? Because if you again, it's to your point from earlier in the conversation, you never know what mental state people are in when they're, and you have no control over it if it's in text, right? Like if you have them on the phone and they're in a bad mood, then you can at least do some damage control,
Yeah.
But, and so I got this wall of text, and I sat on it for 3 days because I didn't want to be a jerk, and finally I was just like, sure, here's some things you could do, right? But it wasn't what they wanted, and then they didn't have any follow-up. They didn't have any follow-up game on that, but it's interesting. It's like if they had just sent me a couple lines and said hey, can we get 15 minutes? They would have got my Calendly response, book whatever you want, we'll talk, and then they would have had 15 minutes to convince me that it was a good idea, as opposed to
yeah.
And so, again, it comes down to being a human. And I know people get excited. They think that the product is the coolest thing ever, and they expect everyone to love it as much as they love it. But yeah, I don't know. Take the time, go through the steps, learn about your customer, figure out how they operate, whatever. Blocking and tackling.
Yes. We think about it if we're kind of in the business, right? We think about that like it's fundamentals, right? Blocking and tackling. And the reality is, and I guess maybe to use, keep that analogy going, the reality also in most sports and even professionally is fundamentals get forgotten, right? As people move on, they just get out past that. And some people, now in sports, you can't ever get there without having learned the fundamentals. It's no way, right? So at some point, someone teaches it to you, forces you into it. In business, not so much. In business, there's no coach necessarily, and most of the coaches aren't great anyway. But even when there's a coach there, and so we don't know, think of it from a customer's perspective. I've seen people come out of school, they just got their marketing degrees, and they start a business, and I ask them, who's the target market? And the answer is some kind of bullshit, right? Anyone really who it's dude, it just fucking came out. That's 101. You've got to start here.
I think schools do a poor job with a lot of this because it's so broad. It's all 100 level stuff, and truthfully, a lot, rarely have I talked to an instructor who was in the field or in the field recently, right? A lot of times it's I just continue on through education. So there's a lot of book smarts, read a lot of stuff, but not a lot of tangible rubber meets the road experience.
Especially with digital. Yeah, especially with anything.
Oh yeah.
Digital, for sure. They're way behind. But I do know they covered that. I do know that in there,
I know it was in the
targeting.
book.
They had 101. They had you target a certain market and you create a profile. Even school has that information.
Well,
and we just don't do it.
Most of the tools have it, right? Any tool you're going to use has the take our course to learn how to be effective because customer success, right? They want you to spend more money, and the only way you're going to do that is if you're good with it. So
yeah, and we still don't. So I know there's the not looking at it from the customer's perspective, as you said. There's certainly we're so close and excited about our own thing. We think it's the answer to everything. We think it's going to work for everybody, and it's a no-brainer. Nothing smells like sales death worse than people thinking their product is a no-brainer or the service is a no-brainer.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not. You're not using your brain. That's how it's a no-brainer. You're not thinking about how other people don't feel how you do. And then, of course, there's testing, right? I mean, you can think you have a good plan. You might have you thought about it from a customer perspective, but you don't know until customers validate that. And that's a customer success and then optimization conversation. But you and I were talking earlier as we've jumped around wildly in this conversation. And, besides the intro and knowing how to connect people and get in with people and not turn people off with your approach, hopefully, especially if it's localized. But in terms of people selling different things, right?
Yeah.
And selling things that are in very different price ranges. I mean, for example, I mean, you just talked about that sales story where obviously there's
Right.
some very different price ranges getting sold to you from these conference folks. Because you
Yeah.
went from well, what we're trying to do is 13,000, and that's our only option, to like 99 a month per. It's a pretty wide. And I would think that in some cases, right, the person who can sell the six-figure SaaS package, that's a different sale, a different approach, a different maybe person than the person who's going to go out there and kill it at $100 a month subscriptions.
Yeah, totally.
Or
I
fewer.
mean,
So talk about that. Like, what's your take on salespeople and price range?
I mean, it was something that was taught to me by a sales guy really early in my career, was just that, like, you have to figure out what your price range is. Like, there's people who can schlock a couple $100 phones at AT&T like it's going out of style, right? And they just crush. They'll just, they'll hit all their bonuses and everything. But you give that person a $100,000 thing to sell, like they're, like a real estate agent or a car or a big enterprise program, and they crumble because it's a totally different game.
Yeah.
And And I think it's like every order of magnitude is like hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, right? And luckily, I guess for me, is like my wheelhouse has been like, I found out it was like the million plus range, and it's because to me, like, I know that whoever I'm selling $1 million thing to, it's probably not their money. Right. So if it goes really badly, I still don't have to feel a ton of emotional guilt. And two, usually the things that I've been selling at those price points are very like research and development oriented. And so if you have a couple $1 million to spend on like, hey, what if, then it's not even impacting your bottom line. Like, no one's going to lose their job if we like completely fail to execute, which is obviously never your goal. You want to do the best thing possible, but
yeah.
And so I liken it to it's like monopoly money, right? And so as long as I can like estimate, like I just go into the Excel spreadsheet and I put in all the labor rates and the materials and double everything and add 30% because I work in R&D and something always goes wrong. Yes. And then I go, this is the magic number, it's going to cost $3.6 million over 3 years. Cool. All right. And then like, they look at like their spreadsheet and they go, yeah, that number's less than our spreadsheet. We're cool, and stuff. And that's why I've always been driven into corporate sales. Like, even when I was a commercial photographer, I didn't shoot weddings again, because highest price point someone's going to pay for something for a 1-day service, probably in their life. And there's a ton of emotion tied into it. And if you screw up this much, like you have to feel that guilt. And I was just never interested in that. And I could go to a Fortune 500 and say like, hey, I want to shoot your event. And I'd make as much money as like top tier wedding photographers, and I would deal with secretaries. And it was literally like, your X is less than my Y. All right, cool, buddy, let's go. And they'd fly me out to some city, and I would, sit in a conference center and take pictures. And so, but the point being, I think it's really important to kind of figure out like where in the spectrum you're comfortable, right? Because, it's not comfortable selling millions of dollars of stuff sometimes, but and I've never made commission on those sales. Unfortunately, it's always been like for my startup, and so we have to earn every penny. But what I was going to say, I was doing some gov sales, and the funniest thing was that, I wrote this proposal, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's like perfect. I spent 2-3 weeks, getting it to every period polished and shined. And when it comes back, after it comes back through the proposal process, like approved, again, it was like a $3 million proposal, and it was like stamped, like things were like misspoke, and it was just like handwriting. It was literally someone just trying to get it off their desk because they had like way more important stuff. They were just like, oh yeah, okay, cool, see you later. and like that was another moment in my career where I was like, oh, like what seems like a lot to me does not seem like a lot to them, and knowing what the tolerances are for pricing, what's the elasticity, is really important to your sales process. Because you could kill yourself, trying to scrape $2 or $3 grand out of a proposal when it's like rounding error, and they're not even gonna see it.
Yeah, they don't care. For you, that's like my expenses this month, and for them, it's like, oh no, I lost that like last week, and I didn't even think about it. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The pricing and that context of the pricing, right? Of the like,
Yeah.
what do people really care about? Because you can also sell something for millions of dollars into a business that, if it doesn't work, is going to destroy the business. And
Oh
in this
yeah.
case, like that's a little bit of a different pressurized kind of a sale environment.
Well, I'm always always be ethical, right? Like I would never sell something that I didn't completely believe in.
Right.
And that's just who I am. And that's why I'm so focused on being a good listener and building a broad network, because it allows me to take risks. I tell my
Yep.
wife and my kids, like, hey, worst case, something goes wrong because of coronavirus, we lose funding or whatever. Like, I've helped 500,000 people in the last 24 months. Like someone's gonna find me a net to land on.
Yeah.
And that's my whole life. Like, not, and this is something that I see sales folks dive into sometimes, is like, I stay out of debt, right? Like I own all my stuff as much as I can, right? Like I've never driven the 5 Series BMW or anything like that. I have a 10-year-old Volkswagen sports wagon diesel. Yes. But that allows you to take risks. If I don't have a big nut to crack, I can go do the risky thing, and it might have a lot more upside. Whereas if I know I got to make that payment, and I saw it happen with coworkers time and time again, where, they got the $350,000 house and the $80,000 car, and, and then with that comes the stress, and they end up in like drugs and alcohol, and then they got to close the sales, but like they're underperforming because of their addictions. And then bam, you're out of the job and you have this huge nut to crack. And what does that look like?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, keep it simple. Keep it
mindful. Be
yes.
mindful.
Mindful and simple. That's good. So normally we do this in the beginning, but since everyone's already seen us drink like all throughout this thing, why don't you tell us what it is you're drinking this morning, and if there's a story behind that, perchance, what is it?
So first of all, I'm gonna plug what I was planning on drinking, because I love the folks. Cornerstone Coffee. They're Bad Panda. I've drank pounds and pounds of it over the course of my life. But I was telling Paul earlier, I got food poisoning on Monday, and I have this theory or it was Tuesday. I have this theory, if you get sick and you're addicted to anything, like that's the time to cold turkey. Because you're already paying the iron price. and so you're like, are you going to notice the headache that you already have? And so I cut out coffee. And so I'm like a couple days out of the caffeine withdrawal. And so today I'm actually drinking Bigelow Perfect Peach. And it's delicious.
Nice.
But thankfully, food poisoning has got the monkey off my back. I am caffeine free for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I certainly wish you well in your recovery, and and we'll see. Yeah, down the line, if I see you with the coffee cup in your hand, I'll try not to do the like squat it out. You said intervention.
I never judge people. On that sort of stuff. Addiction is hard. Luckily, I've always caffeine. Maybe in college there was a little bit of alcohol addiction, but as an adult, just caffeine. But I've never been able to kick it. So I get off of it for a little while, and then it creeps back into my life.
Yes. Well, as the cliche goes, right? You got to have at least one vice, they say. So
well, and it's fun to go fast. Fun to go fast.
Okay, good. Yeah, coffee is it. So be it. Some of us have a few more than that, and it's interesting. But all right, man. Well, I'm going to cut you loose so you can get on with your day and your tea drinking and your recovery and directing of programs and whatnot. But I really appreciate you coming out and filling us in on some wisdom for the sales people, more information on the Brews and BizDev about how not to approach people, and some ideas on how to. And I really like that stuff about the pricing, because knowing the lane that you can get in and really kill it and be comfortable is important. As someone who's sold various different price things, from the door-to-door Uverse services in the West Coast, door-to-door broadband, all the way up into, 6-figure marketing packages.
So what's your lane? What's your space?
I like this one a lot better. Like me, I'm not a friendly presence at people's doors, Tark. Like nobody wants to see like the giant guy sweating profusely at the front door trying to sell them some kind of, especially from a comm
And
company.
now in a mask. Now you'd be in a mask too.
Yeah, no. Oh God, I can't even imagine that. When I was doing that in Austin, I'd look on those thermometers, those outside thermometers, and we weren't allowed to go inside, right? Like it was
Yeah.
against the rules because we were outsourced.
Yeah.
And it's 100 fucking 20, and I'm just sweating. And because I'm not in Austin, I'm in suburban Texas. It's very un-Austin, and so like I had full sleeves down, so you couldn't see my tattoos. So I was just sweating like Nixon, except I'm like 2 feet taller than he was, and like it's not a good mix for residential door to door. That's not my thing. I
It's not your
learned,
thing.
but you drop me in a room with people who were looking for a new idea and
Yeah.
could use a little bit of direct kind of feedback, and people who appreciate the rough around the edges direct speak. I do fucking.
Yep. Awesome.
So,
Well, it's good.
yeah, that's my lane. I'm glad you
Know thyself.
and thanks again for coming out, man. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it. WNYstartupcommunity.com. Join the startup community Slack. Lots of good information on there.
Awesome.
WNYstartupcommunity.com. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thanks so much.